sections of disability that's taking part as part of the Nova Scotia Access Awareness Week 2022, in which Nova Scotia is celebrating 35 years of access awareness. So throughout the week, there have been various events, public and within government offices, to promote and celebrate access awareness and accessibility, and to elevate the discussion about removing barriers to full participation for persons with disabilities. My name is Jeff Overmars. I'm coming to you from the Halifax office of the Nova Scotia Human Rights Commission in Chibouctouc, Halifax. I am here as host, stepping in for a colleague. Grateful to be part of this discussion and to have been part of the planning committee for this year's Access Awareness Week, Nova Scotia. I'd like to start by acknowledging that we're having this discussion, each of us in our various parts of the province, on the historic and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. These lands are overseen by the treaties of peace and friendship, and I would like to acknowledge the Mi'kmaq as the past, present, and future stewards of this land. I would also like to take the opportunity to acknowledge the immense contributions of Black, African Nova Scotian, and people of African descent to the history and culture of Nova Scotia. We're going to dive into the panel discussion in a moment. And first, I'd just like to introduce our three panelists, and you'll see them on the screen. And maybe when I say their name, they could raise their hand to make an indication. One thing I should say, and this is important, is that I am a European descent, a man of European descent with blonde hair that probably needs a haircut, wearing a green checkered shirt and gray suit jacket. So I would ask, when I introduce the panelists, when they get on to their first question, I'd ask that they would give a similar visual description for those individuals who may be tuning in who are blind or visually impaired. Leslie Daye, as her bio reads, after being diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, she retired from a career in the public service with the Government of Canada, both in the provincial and federal governments. She's always been passionate about employment equity. Life is a journey, not a destination. Then I would like to go on to welcome to Leslie. I'd like to go on next to our next panelist, Lux Habrish. Lux is a multidisciplinary visual artist and facilitator and a support worker of mixed Chinese and German heritage. She practices in Chibouctouc, and she is committed to externalizing. She's committed to developing inclusive, creative platforms and reimagining cultural futures. Lux externalizes intense internal grievances to open the collective to open up collective issues and qualities of larger community struggle. And I apologize, I am visually impaired myself, so I should probably not be reading this. Thank you, Lux, for being here. The final panelist is Holly Gallant, and she is from the Annapolis County in Nova Scotia. Heidi identifies as a person with a disability and is a member of the 2S LGBTQ+ community. She enjoys music and photography. Heidi has always found herself advocating for herself and for other people with disabilities. And she does not consider her disability to be a hindrance. I would just like to thank Heidi for being here, and there will be an opportunity in just one moment for each of the panelists to introduce themselves a little bit further in our first question. So I would like to get into the first question, and this will provide each panelist an opportunity to say a little bit more about themselves, and as I said, possibly provide a visual description for the audience. Lux, I might start with you if you're okay with that. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself and how disability affects your life and your identities?
Hello, Jeff. Yeah, so my name is Lux Habrish. I am uh, a femme presenting individual, early 30s of East Asian descent. I have black hair and hooped earrings, and I'm wearing a stained glass patterned shirt with a loose shirt over top. So I have a lot of notes for today. It was a process of helping me try and, gather all my kinds of intense feelings and thoughts about all of it. I think that's especially when it comes to marginalization and disability, there feels to be this great responsibility to kind of represent the community. I'm going to try and get out of that mindset as well and just kind of live and speak from my own experience. So I have multiple disabilities. I have invisible, mental, but also physical. I have a connective tissue disorder. I also have CPTSD, which is, looking at, disability on a genetic level, but then also disability on a level that emerges from structural violence, and that it can live in the body and how it creates disability and amplifies disability. Myself, I work in care fields and the creative field. So I feel, even though I was diagnosed very later in life, I was very much aware of an otherness in a lot of spheres. And so it kind of drew me to working in access from a young age, trying to fill those gaps with compassion and care. And then doing that specifically through creativity. As for the way that disability affects my life, I guess it's so personalized to each one of us, and it's also embodied. So oftentimes it involves not knowing or not being able to predict the way that my body is going to behave in certain situations. So it's having to have conversations of compassion with myself, but also that's why we require opening up these conversations, because it's exhausting to have to self-advocate, especially when I'm in a flare-up or when I'm struggling. And especially if we are only thinking very narrowly in terms of the way folks exist in the world. Because like when I talk about disability too, I definitely identify as neurodiverse. So within the ways that I learn and speak and process information, it's definitely, I've had to find my methods throughout the years and my different community clusters that I feel supported in, to be able to help me with my basic needs. That's all I have to say on that for now. Things will probably come up later, probably inspired by my fellow panelists. But that's a bit about me for now.
Thanks so much, Heidi. That was a lovely introduction. Lux, I apologize, and I really appreciated the clusters of communities, and I think that really gets at kind of the heart of the intersectionality piece, is that we are such complex beings with so many relationships and so many identities that are part of different communities. It really is a mosaic. So hopefully we'll dig into that a little bit more as well. Just looking here, I'm hoping maybe Leslie, I can go on to you next and have you talk a little bit about yourself and how your disability affects your identities.
Good morning, Jeff and panel, everyone that's listening this morning. My name is Leslie Daye. I'm an African Nova Scotian, 56-year-old African Nova Scotian woman. I'm wearing a blue and green kind of printed dress or top, and shoulder-length brown hair. My experience in the in this field began in 1988 when I when I got a job with the province of Nova Scotia, and I met a lady named Elizabeth McDougall, and she was in charge of, at the time, it was called Affirmative Action, the Affirmative Action Program. And there were women, First Nations, visible minorities, and disabled people, and that were identified in that group. And at the time, I jumped right in because I felt like I always identified firstly as African Nova Scotian. And my father, being Buddy Daye, we grew up with a lot of talk in the struggle. So that was a big part of my life, or the biggest part of my life. Shortly after working with Elizabeth McDougall, of course, I realized that I was a woman, and I came into that part. I could identify with that. We had to transfer over to the federal government in the early 90s from the provincial, and I met a gentleman named John Burke. He was in charge of employment equity at Revenue Canada at the time. And I saw John go from a cane, walking with a cane, to walking with a walker, to a wheelchair. Not shortly, but sometime after that, so many years, I was diagnosed with, things started getting funny for me. My understanding, my cognitive skills, my speaking, things just started getting kind of different for me. And I was diagnosed. They had to take me from work one day, and I was eventually diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. I didn't even realize that MS was the same thing as multiple sclerosis. So one of my friends called me from work, and she was like, "I can't believe you have what John Burke had." And I said, "No, I don't. I have," because anyway. I didn't even understand at the time that I had multiple sclerosis. I didn't understand a lot about the disease. So at that time, then I had to take on the banner of, I'm a woman, I'm Black, I'm a woman. While I was off work, I was doing some research on the disease, and the doctor at the time that did my operation, Dr. Holness was his name, and he said, "Well, it's either a malignant tumor or benign tumor or an infection like MS," because they said they saw a mass this big on the left side of my brain when they did the initial test. And anyway, so at the time he was Black, and he said that MS is not common in our people. So I was like, fine. But after he did the operation, when he did the biopsy, we found out that it was in fact MS. So I kind of hit all four of those. I'm wearing all four of those banners now: women, First Nations, visible minority, and disabled now. A big part of my disability is it's more or less it's the hidden disability. My lesions, I have lesions on my brain, and the lesions are on the side where comprehension and cognitive skills are affected. And so for me, just being in the public eye, like going into a store and you're ask a question, and sometimes the answers that people give you are just so flippant. They just assume that you understand, or that you can. For me, it's like my doctor at the time, when they did some tests on me, on my understanding and my comprehension. He said, "You're very intelligent. I know that you understand the meaning of different words or the meaning of different situations, and that it's just that with me, it's like I have to open up so many doors. Is it information in here? Nope. Is it information in here?" So sometimes I'm a little delayed. It just takes me a minute to put things together. So I find a lot of times in the public eye, people just assume that you can automatically pick up on things, be it on the phone or in person. So I find myself now having to tell people, could you just slow down and explain that again? I have cognitive challenges. So I just need you to slow down and say it again. So a lot of times, the second time when they say it or when they do slow down, of course I can understand, but it just takes me a minute. And sometimes it's hurtful that I can't do maybe what I used to do, or I can't do what everybody else can do. But yes, I do understand eventually, and I'm in the. I put on my bio that life is a journey, not a destination. I'm finding out that I am on my journey, and it's a very interesting journey, and it's unfolding right in front of my eye. But so I'm up for the challenge, and we can carry on with the conversation, and I'll jump in when I can going forward.
Thank you very much for sharing that, Leslie. One thing I hope maybe we can circle back to at some point, you made reference to how your disability may show up when you walk into a store. And there's been a lot in the news over the years about consumer racial profiling and the effect that that has had on communities of color. And I'm wondering, we can get to it later as to whether you've ever found that, whether your cognitive issues you've described, whether there's been instances that may have come about due to consumer racial profiling that you found yourself really struggling with. So I won't assume that was been your experience, but maybe
exactly. Yes, I do have an experience. I do have an experience I'd like to share. Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
That's great. And I'm just gonna move right along now. Heidi, I'm hoping that you can jump on now to talk a little bit about your life. Maybe describe a little bit of your experience, what your disability is, and how that might affect the way that you identify and the communities you identify with.
Well, going through, from a little girl, I've had a lot of visual problems growing up. That is caused by my heart. I was born with congenital heart disease, which affected my eyes. It affected my kidneys. It affected, it went throughout me. So growing up in a school system that is not so kind to those who have visual problems or other setbacks towards spelling, math, all of those. That affected me a lot. But I've learned different ways to cope with what I've had to go through in my school days. And my adult life is a completely different scenario. Now it's not only school peers, it's also people on the street. It's also people in stores. It's also my coworkers, it's my bosses, it's my friends, it's my environment that I'm in. So everything really affects me. But I've learned to cope with, and coming out when I was 13 at school with a disability, or as I like to call it, a setback. I don't like that word. I'm sorry. I don't. It was told that I was copying my friend, that I was just doing it for people to like me, that I was just like, well, no, that's not why I'm doing it. I'm doing it because I like girls and guys. Like, that's who I am. That is how I identify. And, being a person of the LG,
it's a lot of letters.
It's a lot of letters with a 2. Being part of that community and also being a person that identifies as a disability, or as I like to call it, setback, has been really, really challenging, but it's also been rewarding, because now with those labels, I'm able to overcome what people thought I couldn't. You know, stereotyping, education, working, interaction socially, you know, all of that stuff has stemmed from people just giving me a chance. But then again, you still have those other people that will come in and tell you, hey, you can't do that. Want to bet? Like,
do you want to describe what you look like?
Oh yeah, I got some brown wavy hair on top of my noggin in a ponytail right now. I have thick glasses that are tinted because my eyeballs, you don't want to see them. I have a little nose. I have big old lips. I got big cheeks. I'm a bigger woman. I have white skin. I identify as a Caucasian female. What else do I have to do?
Because you're in your brain injury.
Oh,
What do you call the community, the LGBTQ community? Because you get confused with all the letters. Now, what do you call it?
the rainbow community. I love that community because I'm a part of it. And I'm so proud to be a part of it. And I'm so proud to be able to identify under the rainbow because, you know, hiding it for so long and not being able to express myself for who I am and what I would like to portray to the world of what I want the world to see, you know.
It's a really great segue, Heidi, and I might stay with you because I'm really liking your energy right now. But the second question was, and you've kind of gotten into this a little bit, but what communities do you consider yourself a part of? So we've kind of gotten into that a little bit. So what communities do you consider yourself a part of, and what does intersectionality mean to you? And if you don't get to it, I may prompt you with something you said you were working on. So you can start with that question in terms of what communities do you belong to, and what does intersectionality mean to you?
I'm a female. I am part of the disability community. I am also part of the rainbow community.
I think you're disability-wise, you have two, right?
I have
Physical
two.
and
I have visual, physical, and intellectual. But it doesn't slow me down.
So what is intersectionality?
Heidi, you were describing when we first met, you were describing a pride celebration that was going to be happening down in your neck of the woods, and you were talking about it. You were talking about a particular event that was taking place where people were to be lined up and then taking steps forward and steps back. Would you mind describing that event?
Yeah, I'm gonna need help with that.
So when we first started, Heidi had some question about what intersexuality was. And I found a video forever ago that showed a race. And it wasn't really disability related, but Heidi had an idea to make it disability related. It was a lot more about race and poverty. So this weekend, we are going to have several people line up on the center line of the field, and we're going to ask different questions. So, you know, if you're a female, take 2 steps back. If you're a female with a disability, take 3 steps back. If you identify with the rainbow community, take an extra 4. If you're a colored person, take an extra 4, etc. And continue. And then we want to look and see where everybody is for that visual representation, and ask people, you know, if they think the people that had to take all those steps back have a chance at winning this race called life without some supports, because they didn't even get to start at the halfway mark with us. They were way back there.
I thought it was a really good representation because we all need help. We all could help each other. You know, if a person is like 5 steps back behind you, reach your hand out, you know, pull them up with you. We're all in this together. Every one of us.
I think it's an excellent example. And would you mind introducing yourself, their helpful partner in crime?
Oh dear. My name is Jamie Lynn. I just ruled. I forgot to swallow my hand. Sorry about that. My name is Jamie Lynn. Oh, I am the project coordinator for People First Nova Scotia. I'm here helping Heidi today.
Awesome. And thank you, Jamie, for being here as part of this as well. I'm going to move on to Lux to see if you tackle this second question in terms of what communities you consider yourself to be a part of, and what does intersectionality mean to you?
Right. Thank you, Jeff. So fundamentally, I think it just refers to, oh, am I frozen? Uh-oh. Okay. Yeah, fundamentally, I think it just refers to how we're all composed of multiple parts, and these multiple, intersections within our lives have very real repercussions, and also like social reinforcements, right? And by that I mean, so I'm part of the queer community, but I'm also racialized. But within all those parameters, there's even more categories, right? And then, well, nuance, let's say, but then also within disability, and then all of these things just layer up, right? So I think of my queerness, but then also I don't quite identify with womanhood either. And then being mixed race, I'm sometimes in white spaces, I'm not white enough. And in Asian spaces, I'm not Asian enough. And then within disabilities spheres, I'm often, it took me such a long time to really embrace that that intersection, because I felt like an imposter with invisible disabilities. Yeah, and then, like I just finished reading a CBC article that was talking about racism rampant in LGBTQ 2S plus communities, which is absolutely true. But so that would very clearly exemplify where the layers of harm and violence and obstacles, where those very real repercussions start coming into play, is when you hold so much and live right at the periphery, and everything interacts as well, right? So what I did mean to mention earlier is that, like, all of these racism, homophobia, all these things, they heighten the trauma, which then worsens disability. So it's, as much as we want to see separate intersections, everything is interconnected as well. So I had this beautiful discussion with my brother's partner, who we've been working very closely alongside each other over the last years. Her having been diagnosed early with Crohn's disease, which is also invisible, and the way that it's kind of framed her life, and just talking about perspective. And so thinking about the model of, if you're looking at life from the center of a pie outwards, your perspective is only going to be so large. But when you're viewing it from the peripheries, you're able to see a lot more, especially physically living through those intersections. It's, we need to listen to folks that live right at the fringes. There's so much lived experience, which is legitimate knowledge. Anyways, I'm rambling now, but
not at all. I think that the point about lived experience really captures the importance of panel discussions like this that open up the idea of disability and intersectionality to be articulated and explored and considered from various perspectives of first voice experience. So Thanks so much, Lux, for that. Leslie, I'm just wanted to go to you now with that question about what communities would you consider yourself to be a part of? And you touched upon it a bit in your first answer. And what does intersectionality mean to you?
Well, like I said, I've always considered myself a visible minority, but I have since, I wear the banner of being a woman, an African Nova Scotian woman, and then since when I was off sick, and after the doctor said that it wasn't common disease for Black people because I've only always identified as Black. I did some research to try to find out a little bit about my father's history because we didn't get this nose from anywhere. So anyway, I found out that my father's grandmother was on a reserve in New Glasgow. They got her from a reserve in New Glasgow, a white family, but raised her Roman Catholic, and she met and married, I guess, my great grandfather. So that's where. So now, I can identify with the First Nations community too, although I'm not very active in it as much as I would like to be. What was the second part of the question? What communities do I identify with?
And what does intersectionality mean to you? Would be
Well, I
the
think that
part.
to me, it's so much a part of who I am, because when you put it all together, when you realize, and for me, I'm a Christian woman, so I've seen and understood the hand of God in my life and how He worked everything out so many times so that for my good. And so everything came together and it all worked out in the end. So now I realize who I am, and I can touch and relate to all these different sections or segments of people. The women, the First Nations, the visible minority, and the disabled. Because also, when I was working, I remember I went to a conference, and they had a woman come in and speak, and she was fine. She looked perfectly normal, and she was representing the disabled community. Um, and I just really couldn't understand, how can this now you want me to believe that this woman has a disability. And she came in, and then she walked in fine, and then she got a chair and she just put her leg up on the chair, and she talked to us, for however long the segment was. She presented with her foot in a chair. I was like, that's a disability. Yeah, right. I didn't understand hidden disability until I was diagnosed. And until this thing unfolded with me, the MS was one thing, the cognitive challenges, the understanding or the misunderstandings sometimes. And to me, sometimes it makes me very defensive, because I'm like, if someone says something, I don't understand it, or I don't jump on it or right away, then and their answer or their response sometimes is kind of like, what's wrong with you? Like, are you stupid? Or for me, it's like, you think I'm stupid? You think I can't understand? So there's always them few seconds of that, but then I have to pull it back, right? And no, I'm and try to make myself understand. It's not always someone thinking that you're stupid or you don't understand. It's just and it's for me to understand how I can better explain myself or my needs to other people at that time. And again, I worked on the section with we worked on a different project with Jeff and I can't remember the other man's name, and we were talking about accessibility and how we can improve it in Nova Scotia, I guess in Halifax and in Nova Scotia. I think it's really important if we consider different people's types of disabilities and try to address as best we can, what somebody else's challenges might be. And especially when they come out and tell you, the response from the the clerks or the people in authority, it's really important how you respond to people when they tell you about their disability, and for people to come up with compassionate answers or compassionate responses. And how they respond to people is really important, and it can make or break somebody, at a very pivotal time.
I want to drill into that just a tiny bit. You did describe, or you confirmed that you had an experience that related to consumer racial profiling, and how maybe your cognition at the time maybe complicated that a little bit. And I think you talk about how your need to better explain to somebody. I think the other side of that is the compassion that's needed in the general public and within the service sector and within all aspects of our society to not assume anything about anybody, but rather, so instead of the burden being on you to articulate why you're not understanding something, I'm just wondering if you could share that experience, if you have one, or if there was just describe
Absolutely.
your experiences and how you
the
think.
First thing that came to my mind is a few months ago, I guess it was in November, we went to Yarmouth. I've never been to Yarmouth. I went to Yarmouth for the first time. So I called ahead and I booked a hotel room, because we were going to stay overnight. When we got to the hotel, of course, I made the arrangements on the phone. When we got to the hotel, and to me, when she saw that I was Black, it was like you could see the person was visually surprised and startled. And so she said, "Well, we have to run your card right away. I need to put your card through right away." I was like, "But we're just checking in." Like, "Oh, well, we can't check you in until you pay up front. You have to pay up front." I said, "I gave my credit card when I booked the room." "Yeah, but we have to run the credit card to see if it's, make sure it's good. You might have overspent for Christmas, or maybe you don't have as much room on the cards. So you're just assuming maybe because I'm Black that I'm having financial charges, or you're assuming because whatever, that I don't have whatever." But I thought I was very clear, and I thought I was very, I was, exercising forethought in terms of booking the room and making sure that that was done. Somebody with a disability, okay, I'm going to book the room. I'm going to make sure I give my credit card. And as a person with a disability, you always want to make sure you do things. You don't want people to ask you crazy questions. In the big, just a second. And so the thing is, she ran my card before the night we stayed, before we actually stayed that night. And so I felt like how would you know if we were only staying for one night? Like, well, why would you think we would not stay for 2 nights? But for her, it was, I have to make sure that this person, that she actually has, the credit on this card, or it's a good card or whatever. So for me, that was and then the next day, I asked to speak to her supervisor. And that's when I was trying to, articulate, I think from a I guess this, from a person with disability challenges. I'm trying to articulate to you what I need, and then you're giving me this backlash, like I need to have your card right away. And then, like, be it from either from a person with a disability, or visible, they see this before they find out that, it takes me a minute to click in sometimes. So I explained to her that for me, it was confrontational for her, and demeaning for her to require that from me beforehand, upon arrival, because it's a long drive, and upon arrival, I have to deal with you doubting my word, or because of the color of my skin, thinking that there might be some. And then it was, well, what brings you to Yarmouth? Why are you here? I think that's my business. I don't think it's not your business. But anyway, it was a different experience. And then, just people like in general, the conversations that I've been in, and people saying like, well, I just told you, when they explain something, I just told you, even on the phone with Sun Life, they have my medical insurance, and I'm trying to put in a claim for something. And then you have to do it online. And I'm getting better at it. But when I was first doing it, when I first putting in the claims or learning how to do that, and I didn't understand. I had to call maybe 2 or 3 times to get them to walk me through it. And and even with an organization like Sun Life, the person's on the phone saying, well, I just told you. It's like, that answer is not helpful, and that answer is not encouraging. It's not acceptable in this day and age. Like, you just don't talk to people like that. So we have to be careful how we speak to each other.
Yeah, I think
Mhm.
Leslie, it really illustrates. Thank you for sharing that
You're
experience.
welcome. You're welcome.
It's always hard to share them. It's traumatic and can be upsetting. So we really do appreciate you sharing that story, and it just demonstrates that this is an issue of dignity and respect and compassion for one another, and that is something that we need to try to instill in our daily activities and our interactions with other people, because we really don't know where people are coming from at any given point in their day. So
That's
thank
right.
you
I
thank you
think
so much.
Tina just wrote in the chat room. She was asking whether or not they just needed the money for the damage deposit. No, because I had given my credit card. So, um, they had my credit card there, and I suppose they could look and see, if it was a good card or not. But she said, we have to run the whole thing. We have to run the whole thing. We have to put the whole thing through. And I said, well, will you not be here in the morning when we check out? Oh, well, it might not be me. I said, well, I'm sure they'll have somebody on the desk. But so somebody named Tina was just asking about that. Maybe they were just running the damage deposit. No, it wasn't the damage deposit. They wanted the whole thing up front before we stayed. And
And
like I
it's
said, we might have stayed for 2 nights, which I wouldn't after they treated me like that. No.
It's unfortunate. I'm sure, Leslie, there are many people that can reiterate and share the similar experiences that they've had
Yeah.
throughout different areas of Nova Scotia. And it's a very, an unfortunate truth right now that we are still continuing to work and to educate on issues of respect and dignity and the rights of individuals,
Right.
Black and African Nova Scotian communities, and to discriminate is illegal under the Human Rights Act.
Yeah.
I'm going to move on to the next question, and I wanted to target Lux with this one because of your comment about the various clusters of groups that you're a part of in the work that you do and in where you live. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about, in your experience, do you find that these clusters, these communities that you're a part of, are accepting or welcoming to people with disabilities, and why or why not?
I would say that at least we're having a lot more conversations, I would say, as opposed to even 10 years ago, about disability. But unfortunately, I think a lot of it is still talk and not practice. So we're getting better at being able to use the language. And it really, like, at least we are discussing that there's different needs. Like, access is not just, it's not just a physical amendment, adaptation in a space, but access is also mental and emotional. Like, we need to really, I mean, I have notes here. I was writing, like, it really means restructuring every single thing, which is oftentimes there's the appearance of inclusivity. So it's like, oh, we want to support folks with, specialized needs, different needs, except that literally involves restructuring the way that we expect capacity, mobility, time. Time is a big one, especially in this, fast-paced, world that just has very
narrow perspectives about and also values us based on our productivity and what we can contribute. So I also like independence versus interdependence. So often I'm seeing the kind of the words circling, but it's less so in practice. And I think a lot of it is also involved in like this strange social attitudes towards disability that involve infantilizing often. So rather than asking the question, oh, what is it that you need? Or folks tend to be very afraid to even go there, and then will jump into making assumptions, which is also like, if we're just creating, these amendments willy-nilly rather than listening to folks, like this has to be happening in active conversation, especially with the nature of disability. Like things change all the time. Like somebody's needs are constantly changing. Yeah, I mean, the whole thing is involved in just like open dialogue, which obviously like stigma is an enormous part of that. Yeah, I'm realizing my thoughts are kind of all over the place. Just
no, it's wonderful. And I think that you've really opened up, I think, just how welcoming people with disabilities, what does that mean? And I think creating spaces where people with disability feel welcome is exactly what that means.
And not just tolerated, right?
No,
not
exactly.
Just, oh, okay. So, I mean, so often I'll go to spaces, an example, like, I'm involved in a lot of different communities and spaces, and standing is really difficult for me, standing for long periods of time. I need to either be moving or sitting, and even like in any position too long, and then the pain starts sitting in, and then anyways, but it's still in so many spaces, like why are there no benches in these areas? Why are there, why is there no closed caption in this event? Why is everything still a second thought rather than like we're literally creating barriers and making it more difficult for people with undiagnosed or for people sensing that they are on the margins, that they don't quite fit what is I don't know how I feel about the word neurotypical and all that kind of, but like how folks just don't fit. People even self-judge and are critical about disability when they may be experiencing it themselves, right? It's all that internalized kind of shame, and but it does add a barrier for folks that are doing the work too.
Could I just make a plug on the point of creating accessible venues for people, be it an accessible event that's taking place in a physical space or an accessible virtual event? I just wanted to plug the Accessibility Directorate has a wonderful guide for creating accessible events, both in person and virtual, and it's available via the Accessibility Directorate's website. So anybody out there that's interested in learning more about what they can do to create spaces that are, not just tolerating, but welcoming and inviting and hosting people. I just want to jump over to you, Heidi. When it comes to the communities that you participate in, be them the geographic community that you live in or the different communities that you are part of, do you find that people are accepting, welcoming to people with disabilities? Why or why not?
It really depends. Honestly, you go to one store, they could be welcoming, they'd be, oh, how can I help you? And they'd help you around or whatever if you need it. And other times you go into a store and they just look at you like you're basically nothing. And I don't understand that. I don't understand why we can't be all on the same platform. I don't understand why there's got to be so many accessibility issues for those who may not be able to walk and then want to go into that jewelry store, but there's no ramp. Well, what do? You can't go in, and then they're sad. Like accessibility is so important. I dated a guy for 2.5 years that was completely blind. Okay. I literally had to be his eyes, and that was fine with me, right? But it was the steps, it was the no ramps, it was the constant uneven ground, before you get to said shop or whatever. Having those barriers as a blind person, I can't speak for him, but I can speak on behalf of him. Having those barriers as a blind individual is a constant struggle. It's a constant battle. Having those barriers as a visually impaired person, look at that. You see that? You see that? That's impairment right there. That's definite impairment. Having those barriers for myself that I can't see the uneven ground, and I fall a lot. And I'm a big woman. So it's like it's a struggle to get back up too. So it's a constant struggle to find the even ground so that everybody can have the access to what they want access to. It's always going to be a struggle, but we can make it better. We can make it better for those who need that extra step to participate, that extra step to go into a store, that extra,
Heidi, you make an excellent point about the physical barriers that exist in communities. And I think it's also worth noting that as of April 1st of this year, all of the municipalities and counties within the province of Nova Scotia are to have completed their accessibility plans. And part of developing those accessibility plans was convening committees that were composed of people with disabilities that lived within that particular municipality. So people are encouraged to visit the websites of the municipalities that they reside in and see what kind of work is being done, see if there's an opportunity to get involved and to really help drive home the point that these are big issues that do have very negative effects on people living with disabilities throughout the province.
They still have big loopholes because these committees can actually only work on and identify areas that are owned and operated by the municipality themselves. So the stores, the banks, all the things that you literally have to access on a regular basis. I don't imagine very many people go to town hall on a regular, or different things like that. They don't count. They're not on that list.
I can tell you that the Accessibility Directorate is also working with standard development committees, and those committees are developing the standards that will help to provide the kind of regulatory authority to help when it comes to things such as the built environment. So there's a series of different areas where they're developing these standards, and the series of standards for the built environment are in draft form. They are being worked on, and it will be those standards, once they come into play, that will bring into line the standards, I guess, by which people will have to have those accessibility features in place. Just mindful of the time, so I do want to jump into the last question and just allow everybody a chance to speak to that. As we're aware through this discussion on intersectionality, that there are a great diversity within the disabled community, within the community of people with disabilities. And as you look to other social or human rights movements that have taken place over time, it starts with the movement towards greater rights for women, the work that's been done historically to bring greater rights to people of color, Black, Indigenous, And then there's the movement that's we're celebrating during Pride Month, you know, the movement that's been going on for decades to bring greater equity and opportunity and remove barriers and discrimination for people within the 2S LGBTQ community. So maybe I'll go back to you, Lux, for this last question. When you look at those movements that have been taking place and that continue to, because the work is never really done, do you see those movements including people with disabilities? And if so, or if not, why or why not? Is there anything that you've observed?
I mean, I do think, related to the last question, I think a lot has changed over the last decade, but I mean, it's still, it's not enough. I think, right. So, you know, when you think about nothing about us without us, right? So there's complex layers there, right? Because it literally involves acknowledging that the nature of disability often involves interdependence. So we rely on our communities and folks to be able to access and live the lives that we deserve. But that involves being able to advocate for ourselves and communicate our needs because of all the social barriers. And so having to advocate for ourselves, which is exhausting labor, which depletes, you know, like that all takes, you know, empties your tank at the end of the day, you know, tied with the other intersections of like, it's more expensive to live with a disability because you have to have all these adaptations, and that burden ends up on the individual. And then also like the need to work and like all of these things require more labor, which is tied to exhaustion and burnout, which is also tied to mental and social depletion and ostracization. So, but I guess what my point is that the energy it takes to mobilize and take care of our basic needs, it needs to be, we have to restructure everything to involve like not speaking for folks with disability, but recognizing that we are interdependent, that this is a shared responsibility, and that folks with disabilities like are autonomous and have agency, but also need those supports in order to be able to advocate for themselves. I don't know how I froze there. I don't know how much got cut out.
We got all the audio, Lux. You
Okay.
did freeze there for a moment, but thanks so much for that. And it's almost you're framing it up as a bit of advice for other communities as they, you know, carry on their action for change. What can they do to be more inclusive of people with disabilities?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely how I took the question, because I just think we can always be doing more. Like, you know, it feels really sad to be thankful for the little bit of access when, like, I think the entire restructuring that I'm referring to is that instead of, you know, even like medicalized language where we talk about person with disabilities as if that disability is in the person, it's structural. So it's outside factors, it's that create that impairment. And that's really how we have to go thinking about it for everything else to change.
Yeah, Lux, that's a really good plug for those that are viewing this now, currently live or at a later time. There's a good deal of information that can be found either via the Access to Awareness Week Nova Scotia AAWNS.ca website, or simply by Googling to learn about a social model of disability, what is it, and why is it important to consider disability outside of some older models of disability, such as the medical model of disability or the charitable model of disability? There are certainly ways of looking at how these structural issues inform how we even talk about it. Leslie, in your experience, or from where you've observed the world, as you look at movements for greater equity, human rights movements for people of color, for women, for members of the LGBT plus community, do you see people with disabilities in those conversations? And if not, are there ways that you see that they could become more involved?
My first thought when you said that is I'm thinking like in the Black community, I loved Teddy Pendergrass, Harold Melvin, and the Blue Notes when I was coming up, and Teddy Pendergrass was the lead singer, and then he got into a car accident and was paralyzed from the waist down. So he was a handsome sex symbol, soul singer, presenting himself as a sexy whatever man. And he went from that to coming out in a wheelchair, thinking he'd never be able to sing again. And he came out in a wheelchair, and actually he recorded, I think, 2 albums after the accident, and with the with a trach to help him speak or whatever. But I mean, the Black community and the disabled community, I guess, we're behind him 100%, because it's like, if he can do all that, he still has his talent, and he's still able to, sing and do all that with his disability. So I think the important thing for me, is to encourage people in that position to continue to build them up wherever the need is. For me, when I was in the hospital, I had like my last attack. I was in the hospital. I couldn't see. My sight, I had triple vision. I couldn't see. I used to wake up every morning and look over at the clock, and I said, oh, please let there be 1 clock. And there wasn't. I had like triple vision. There were 3 clocks, so the picture was all messed up. And the woman came to visit me in the hospital. I think she was a social worker, and she was asking me about my home situation, my living situation, and just things like she was saying, my bathroom, like, where's your bathroom? My bathroom was up 18 steps. She had to go upstairs 18 steps. And she was like, oh my goodness. I said, well, she said, don't you have a washroom on the first floor? It's like, no, like, how can I can't afford that. And so there was money available for people with disabilities to get the kind of work that they needed done in their homes. So once again, the importance of sharing information or getting information out there that would meet people at their needs. I think that's a really important thing. Yeah, I found that very helpful and encouraging. And in my church, I find people are very supportive, even like in the way they speak, and it's probably from me setting them straight a few times, or just again, just telling people what your needs are. I just need you to slow down and say that again. And also, I've learned some new language. Do I understand you to say, or am I hearing you to say, or whatever. So I find that a good thing too. So back to your question, what was I'm sorry, I get distracted. So
no, I think that you nailed it. In particular, your experiences that you've found communities that you're a part of to be inclusive, and I think that's wonderful. And it does sound as though you play a part in some of that, or at least you've learned from your experience that you have a hand in creating a welcoming and hospitable environment for people.
Right.
Across all sorts of communities. I think that's great. Thanks, Leslie. Heidi, I'm going to jump to you, and then I've got one question from the audience, and we'll get to that if we've got time. So, Heidi, in your experience, and as you're part of or observing movement for equality and equity within, be it gender, within the 2S LGBTQ plus community, within other communities that you're a part of, do you see them being inclusive of people with disabilities?
Not. They try. They really try. Unfortunately, not so much. There's always another step that has to be taken in order for somebody, for instance, in a wheelchair to participate, or someone with an intellectual thing to participate, or like if someone had an amputated arm, like there's always another step that has to be taken, which really, why can't the other step that had to be taken be involved in the same steps in the first place?
Can you give an example of something that you were attending, or you were with somebody that was attending, and that there were barriers or perhaps reasons that you were unable to participate?
Sure. So I was in, it was kind of like I went to like this program, and there was a sheet up at the front of the room, and I couldn't see from where I was sitting. So I literally had to go up to the front of the room and stand about this far away from the paper to see what they were saying and stuff like that, and to see the context and stuff. There was lots of eyes on me and stuff, and it was kind of, but oh man, I lost my train of thought again. That's terrible. Okay. What I'm saying is we should not have to accommodate ourselves to fit the environment. The environment should accommodate to us to fit our needs.
Very well put, Heidi. And I think that's an excellent, again, plug that accessibility directorate resource of, there's 2 documents, one for in-person events and one for virtual events, about what are some steps you can take to ensure that you're not creating barriers and you're not limiting participation for people with disabilities. Thanks, Heidi. The last question, again, came from the public, and it wasn't necessarily related to the subject so much, but I think it's topical given where we are and the fact that we're entering into summer now and COVID restrictions for the most part are gone. But for each of you, and maybe I'll start with you, Heidi, what was the biggest learning that you have from the COVID-19 experience of the last 2 years? Is there something that stands out in particular that relates to your disability? What stood out for you as being a big learning?
Learning how to keep my glasses from fogging up with the stupid mask.
A universal problem. Yeah.
Honestly, though.
Yeah.
You're in front of somebody and your glasses is fogging, you got to take them off and clean them. It's embarrassing, and it's just like, man, shouldn't have to do. Anyways, the biggest thing that I've learned over the past 2 years has been communication is key. If someone is having trouble communicating via verbally, it's hard to hear, let alone understand what they're saying with the mask on. I have to read lips that way, or at least try and read lips so I can understand what they're saying, but you can't do that with a mask on. So there you are, across from buddy, and he's talking, and you can't understand, and you can't tell him to pull his mask down, because you can't do that. It's a pandemic thing. So here I am like, yup, I didn't understand what he said, but I'm, and sometimes I'll get them to repeat, and they'll repeat and stuff, but it's hard, with the verbal and not being able to visually see the lips move for the words. That's hard for me. That's really, really hard.
Yeah, and hopefully more outdoor spaces and less necessity for masks while outdoor gathering together. Hopefully that'll improve things for you.
Well, I hope
Jeff,
so.
Jeff, it's Rosalie, the interpreter speaking. Would you mind making Cindy a panelist again? She got out of the meeting.
No,
and
I'm
back
going to
in.
ask. I'm going to ask the tech support who are here to do that, to take that on, and I'll.
Thank you. She had to
I'll
leave and
focus
come
on
back.
that.
Thank
Oh,
you.
no problem at all. Yeah, that's great. Just going to move on to you, Leslie. When it comes to COVID-19, did you have any major learnings that may have come to you as a result of your disability? Was there anything that really stood out?
What stood out for me, or what first came to my mind during the, especially during the first lockdown, it was a really scary time. And you just, at first it was like, I'm by myself, I'm alone. I had boarders living with me at the time, and they both had to go back to their home countries. So I was all by myself. So for me, it was the panic and like whatever, but learning how to be okay with myself and learning how to be, to be alone and to be strong, dig into my own strength. So for me, that time, and also afterwards, when it opened up a little bit, learning to, as the last girl just mentioned, she was saying, people with the mask. For me, I had to pay attention to people's eyes. And I remember I used to always say in my head, and I would see people, who are you behind the mask? And and people, you can ask yourself that question in everyday life, whether it's the physical mask or just the mask that we put on, like, I'm okay. I'm in excruciating pain 24/7, but I'm okay. You put on the mask to say I'm okay. So during the coronavirus or the COVID restrictions, I think that's what she was asking, how, what are your thoughts or whatever during that time. For me, that's what comes up for me. I'm okay. I have a disability, but I'm okay. I have to look after myself and take care of myself, and I'm okay. And who are you behind the mask? And learning how to read people's eyes. And it's amazing how people can smile with their eyes, even though you can't hear what they're saying, but you can see their eyes like light up. They're happy to see you. I remember thinking, oh my goodness, like you can tell when somebody's happy to see you, when somebody trying to act like, or then you see people that don't want to speak and then they got the mask on. It's like, nope, not me. I don't know you. You don't know me. But anyway, for the most part, it was learning how to read people, even with the mask, and reading the eyes and seeing the smiles in the eyes, as I'm concerned.
Thanks, Leslie. There's been so much adapting. I just want to check in with Wendy, who is the AV support here, just to see if we've gotten Cindy back in as the second interpreter. And if we could prioritize that, please. Just go to you, Lux, for that same question when it comes to the past 2 years of COVID-19 and the various changes that have been taking place. Did you find any major learnings that were related to your disability in that time?
So I think it's twofold. I would say absolutely. So to my own experience, but also I work with the Alzheimer's Society. And it became very evident, how we have this technology available. Why haven't we been using this, right? Why haven't we?
You've got to stop letting me have access. I think I kicked her out.
Oh, I think your mic's on there, Wendy. Sorry, Lux, you can carry on.
What was I saying? Yeah, just how, so I've been able to witness it's been incredible to see how much technology we have available and how we can make it accessible, break it down for folks of all generations to be able to use, to be able to attend events that they wouldn't otherwise attend. I know myself when I'm having a flare up or really not in a good place, how I struggle to be able to access and attend these events and spaces, but it doesn't mean that, like, it still allows me to be connected when otherwise I would be further isolated. So I think, we have the abilities to do so. It's become very evident. And then with that has come the heartbreak of like, well, why haven't we been doing it already? Really about like, we're just not prioritizing communities with needs that fall outside of dominant norms. And how that responsibility ends up on the folks that are firsthand experiencing it. So, so it's been full of feeling, both heartwarming to see the way that things have changed, and that folks now, I can have different experiences than I ever could have had because of virtual connection and opportunities. Also regards to like the work that I do in terms of facilitation, teaching, but then also experiencing culture, so exhibitions, archives, forms of like different platforms of like creative platforms. So
yeah, Lux, I think that's a really important point that has been talked about a little bit, following kind of the return en masse to office spaces and kind of a move away from the virtual spaces. And I think that the learning cannot be lost, that by opening up virtual spaces and everybody learning how to use them so quickly, there's a universal kind of understanding now as to how to use this technology. So let's not stop using it in places where it does actually enhance accessibility, widen an audience, and give people an opportunity to participate in conversations and to be part of conversations and communities that they were otherwise maybe unable to get to or excluded from. So it's really important. And I think this is part of why Access Awareness Week is important and why this panel discussion is important, is because if we're not talking about these issues, then they can often just kind of, people will move on from them. It may not be something that is part of the business model. It may not be, the most convenient for human resources to manage, or it may be a added bit of work when it comes to planning an event to create a virtual way to participate. But when you do create that virtual space or open things up in a new way, it allows everybody to jump on. It may mean having additional support such as ASL or live transcription, and kind of normalizing those services as part of kind of the broader event planning landscape. I think there's work that's being done to do that, but I think it's important to draw attention to it. Just looking at the time, we've got 10 minutes left, and I don't want to drag on, but if there was anything that any of the panelists kind of wanted to get in as a last word or an observation or a thought that's lingering, I'd welcome you to unmute your mic and take a moment to maybe say a few closing remarks. Do I have to call upon someone?
No.
You go, Heidi.
I would just like to say thank you so much for everybody's time today. It's been really, really great sharing, the experiences and stuff like that, and hearing everybody's thoughts and feelings about the same topic really warms my heart. It warms my heart that I'm not the only one fighting for something that should not have to be fought for, but we are. It just warms my heart to know that we're gonna do this together, everybody. We're in it.
Thanks, Heidi. Can you quickly plug this event that's happening? Where is it? At what time? Or if people wanted to line up on a ball field with you?
Oh,
Bridgetown, Nova Scotia.
It's in Bridgetown, Nova Scotia. Tomorrow, from 11 to 1.
At the Community Hub.
And the Community Hub.
Thank you very much for sharing that. And I encourage anybody that can make their way down to the
Come on down, man.
Come on down.
Come race me. I bet you'll win.
The challenge. Leslie, did you have any closing thoughts or closing comments you wanted to make?
Again, I would like to thank you for inviting me to sit on this panel. Since I've been retired, I had to retire on disability. And my thoughts at the time were, like, what am I going to do now? Like, what's my life going to look like? This is the first time for me to be on something like this, a public forum. So this is really nice, and I appreciate you giving me this opportunity. I think it also helps me be more comfortable wearing the different hats that I wear, or the 4 different groups. I also I'm aware of the need to continue to fight, as I'm not good with names. As the last person said, we have to continue to fight for to make things easier and open up things more for people with disabilities, and to make sure that the word gets out when there's services and things available. Again, like me, I found out about this money that was available that helped me. They gave me a bathroom, my downstairs, and they, just a lot of work and stuff. So share information when we find out about things, and encourage people when they're, and be careful how you speak to people with disabilities, and otherwise, just all of God's children, just be careful how we speak to one another, or be aware of how we're speaking, our speech, what we say, our tone, how we say it, whenever. So those are just my closing thoughts. And thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Leslie.
Yeah.
Appreciate that. Lux, is there anything on your mind bubbling up or burning to be said?
I had one more note here that I was thinking about too, tied to intersectionality, and thinking about, unlike other intersections, disability is something that can happen to any one of us at any point in our lives. And I just, that should just be a standing point for compassion, I think. If folks need it to come from, this is something that, could happen to myself, or is something that I'm already experiencing, that I've already cast, not even seen as something that I'm willing to accept, a label, right? Because labels are super complex, and diagnosis can be very liberating and empowering, but the stigma is what creates the label, is what creates all that damage. Anyways, I'm just rambling now, but thank you so much for this opportunity to gather and also just very casually share our lived experiences and thoughts and feelings, and because it is wisdom, it is learning throughout the lifetimes, and that's it too, right? Is that like even all of us panelists here, right? It's like just being curious and compassionate, and opening up lines of communication, because no one experiences this life in a similar way. So, we're so. Yeah.
Thanks. Thank you, Lux, very much. And thank you to the 3 of you. And just on the idea of curiosity and communication, I'm wondering if I could ask our ASL interpreters to turn their camera on. I think we've got Cindy, and is it Rosalind? I just wanted to say thank you.
Yes, that's right.
Thanks to our interpreters for being here as well. And thanks to our captioner for the work that they've done today to ensure that we have live dictation, or live transcription for this event. So this will remain as a recording on the Nova Scotia Human Rights Commission's YouTube channel. So feel free, if there's somebody you think that may enjoy this session, flip them an email with a link. We'd be very grateful. So thank you, everybody. Thank you to the panelists. Thank you, ASL. Thank you for our AV support, and for the members of the planning committee that may manage to pull this event off today. This is Accessibility Awareness Week, and I hope that everybody continues their learning, their activism, their advocacy on throughout the rest of the year. This is an important discussion, and while Access Awareness Week provides the opportunity to really focus in and highlight and create opportunities for learning, there's no shortage of resources. The Accessibility Directorate website is a valuable resource when it comes to materials that can assist in removing barriers. You look at Nova Scotia League for Equal Opportunity and the Nova Scotia Human Rights Commission and other organizations that are serving people with disabilities. Please take advantage of these organizations. Please reach out to them and learn more about what you can do to remove barriers and provide greater support for everybody. And that's it. Everybody's free to go. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Happy Friday.